Okay. And we are live. Hey, what's going on, George?
Hey, not too much. How's everything going?
So we were talking about this before, just with how COVID and the vaccines and your vaccine card. You're in Canada. I'm in the United States.
Yeah.
People don't know that. So now, what's happening? You are um, uh, explain to me what the situation is in regards to how you're teaching and
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah. So over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, right? It's been mostly predominantly online, which has been great, right?
Right.
Um, but things have been starting to open up. So you've got gyms that have been opening up,
Mhm.
martial arts studios, self-defense instructors. They made it very difficult for us because being close contact, close combat, there we weren't really able to do that without a mask. So now here in Ontario, which is where I live, they've now mandated this vaccine certificate program. Goes into effect next week on the 22nd. And all non-essential businesses fall under this. So if you are not double vaccinated here, you cannot go into that establishment. So if you want to go to a restaurant, for example, you're shit out of luck. You're eating out on the patio, or you could walk in long enough to pick up your order, and then you got to get out. So employers are having to check everybody coming in, right, to verify they're double vaccinated. But here's the kicker: businesses themselves, their employees don't have to be double vaccinated. So you could go in, having to be double vaccinated, but your server doesn't necessarily have to be.
Okay.
Right? So the rules are just completely messed
Okay.
up. But
Right.
yeah, go ahead. But following into, we fall into like the gym category.
Mhm.
So because of that, we are not able to work with any non-vaccinated individuals here in Ontario. We can be fined if we choose to go against that. Now it's interesting because I also do private, right? So
Mhm.
private one-on-one is a little different. I think I can get away with not having them to be vaccinated. If I teach outdoors, the rules don't necessarily apply to what they would indoors. But
Mhm.
it's people here don't really know what we're able to do, and it's happening everywhere, right? It's
How
happening.
are they enforcing this?
Um, not really sure at this point. Like what they're doing is they're going to be creating an app come October, right? So that'll almost have like a QR code on it. But right now, if somebody comes to train, they need to have a printout copy of, or on their phone, a copy of a downloaded certificate saying, "Hey, I got my second valid dose." It also has to be a valid dose, and then they have to show some kind of government ID with it. The police have been given the rights. They're starting to go into businesses this week to talk about what's going to be happening and what's coming. To what level of enforcement it's going to be, it's hard to say because I think that's going to be up to each municipality and how they decide that they want to deal with it.
Okay.
Right. But we're finding it not just here in Ontario. It's, British Columbia, out, more on the west coast. Quebec has already implemented this a while ago. Like this has been going on for a month and a bit now in Quebec. Further out east, we're not really seeing this too much yet, but I think that it's eventually going to be across Canada.
So what kind of penalties? What happens? What are the fines,
Um, well,
penalties?
they haven't said what those fines are. They've just kind of used the up to $100,000+ for businesses.
So let's just okay. So let me recap. So only patrons have to be vaccinated.
Correct.
Double,
Double
whatever,
vaccinated.
double vaccinated. So which you're looking at the Moderna, not any other the single stick.
Moderna, Pfizer,
Yeah,
and and
all the
AstraZeneca.
all the
Those are the
protein.
three that are recognized here in Canada.
All right. So as an employer, your employees don't need to be vaccinated.
The government is not mandating that, not enforcing it. Now, there's certain positions in healthcare that it's starting to go that direction. But yeah, at this point, the business is responsible for their own employees. However,
So as if you're as a you're teaching, well, again, whether you're teaching so let's just do brick and mortar first. So you have a martial arts
yeah,
studio, you don't need to be vaccinated, but doesn't matter if it's a restaurant or gym, okay. Anybody coming there has to be vaccinated. You're supposed to ask for proof
Yes.
of vaccination. They're gonna be so yeah. They're gonna have to be vaccinated. They're gonna have to be vaccinated.
Yep.
Again, and we don't know how you're enforcing it, who's enforcing it, or what the penalties are for.
That's right. They're just, they're starting to kind of throw around. And then the last thing that our premier had said here was, we're only going to implement this as long as it's needed, which we know is complete bullshit, because our prime minister is pushing for it across the board. In Alberta, they've actually started incentivizing wanting to pay people like $100 to go and get their fucking vaccine.
Right.
Like the point that it's gotten to. I think that in our province, we're about 82% of eligible people are, and that's anybody over the age of 12, right? Because anybody under the age of 12, 11 years old, they can have it done now. But
go
ahead.
So I just want to joke. We got a comment from Wayne, basically saying they haven't perfected the vaccine, so why get a vaccine when people are still dying after they're getting it? We're trying to deal with the reality of what's put upon us, whether people are dying directly from the vaccine or not. I don't think. Look, the information we're getting is spotty at best. I think we're all falling into the same category when it comes to this, where it's like, yeah, there's clearly a certain, and I hate to use the term, I don't want to say anti-vaxxer, I just want to say more evidence on the other, that doesn't support, the vaccine, on some levels it's obviously getting suppressed. We see examples of that on YouTube and on Facebook and on other social media. So, whether, people are dying as a direct result of that or not, it's really not the issue. What we're trying to do is help, people operate and see what exactly is happening for those of us who, run businesses, who are, who fall under the category of, martial arts, self-defense, gym, studios and things like that. So, yeah, I just want to know, what exactly is going on, because I will tell you, New York City, they are, in order for you to go into a venue, you have to show your vaccination cards. And the reality is, not every place is really asking for this. So while fundamentally, I think it's wrong. This is like, it should still kind of be it should be an outrage. I'm really, because even like you have to look at the risk versus benefit, and the risk here is your freedom, your right to privacy with regards to your health.
Yep.
With the government demanding you do something that may or may not be against your personal or religious beliefs. There's no what is exact risk. I'm going to share something with you. I go I'm still in recovery from my testicular cancer, so now I'm up to every year where I go and get checked. So last time I'm in there, I'm just like, look, the nurse practitioner asked me if I'm vaccinated, and I said no. She's like, why not? And I'm still, I'm like, look, I really don't have enough info yet. I'm not in a position where I need to be. So I'm just going to wait and see. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes. And I'm not ready to say yes yet. Mm-hmm. She's like, well, you're at higher risk. I go, really? How much higher risk? She's like, higher risk. What is that? Is that is that a fraction of a percent? Am I at 1 million? I mean, what number is that? She couldn't give it to me. Of course. And at the same time, I'm like, do you know what the death rate is for somebody in my physical condition, my age group? And no, she's like, no, it's like less than 0.5%. So I'm like, look, so you don't know these things, and you're recommending me take a preventative or take an elective, medication. And, I'm asking you very simple questions. that you should have the answers to when you're prescribing these or recommending them to a patient. So, then it turned into, she's like, well, why are you here? I'm like, I'm here because I'm being treated for an actual illness.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not against all medicine. I'm like, I had cancer. I'm following up for a specific reason. If I cut my hand, I'll go get stitches. If I have a cold that doesn't go away, I'll go get an antibiotic. But first, I'm gonna rest. I'm gonna, bump up my vitamins. I'm gonna take my freaking emergency, and then I'm gonna let it do its thing. I go let my body do what it's made to do. But until then, I'm not going to rush off to the doctor. We live in the most medicated society. I mean, the United States. I don't know about Canada. Do you guys have pharmaceutical? Do you guys have pharmaceutical ads on television?
We see pharmaceutical ads, but it's all U.S. based, right? So
all right. So again, bullshit. I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, why are you showing me these pharmaceutical ads when I'm not a physician? I'm supposed to go to recommend to my doctor, hey, I've got restless leg syndrome or some other bullshit that these guys made up. Look, there's two, you've got to look at, again, you're looking at the pharmaceutical industry and, there's a lot more money in treating people who aren't sick than people who are sick because you don't have to wait for them to get sick. We can just pump you in with whatever we felt is gonna do what it not I get felt is loose. Obviously there's some science behind these things, but in the long term, in the grand scheme of things, you don't know how really well it's going to do. And as well, you'll say like the FDA does its due diligence and testing. I'm like, there are literally thousands upon thousands of drugs that have been recalled that have already been approved, because once they get out, you really just don't know what happens in nature. So, when I'm watching this stuff, I mean, you want to lose your mind. I'm like, you think about how much money it is to be made. Watch HBO has The Crime of the Century, and it talks about the opioid epidemic and how, they basically developed the whole, pain scale. And it's like, everyone's like, oh, you walk in, what's your pain? 1 to 10. It's an 11. I'm like, okay, here you go. Bang. And they did tests on how to get freaking, how much they can actually dose people with basically heroin in a pill.
Yep.
So, now, and then they have the other drugs that have subsequently come along with it. And when you're, the DEA is investigating the distribution companies and pharmaceutical companies who are responsible for bringing this out on grand scale. The Congress passed the Right to Treatment Act, which sounds good. It sounds like the Patriot Act, which, hey, Patriot Act? Yeah, we're going to, get those pesky terrorists. No, you're just going to give up all of your privacy, which is kind of an illusion anyway. And, you're just going to allow people to just, check your email, check all your, check all your correspondence, what your digital footprint looks like. Yeah, it doesn't matter without, due process. So we have that. Pharmaceutical companies were getting investigated, so they changed it and they created the Right to Care Act, which just means, hey, if I have a prescription, I should be treated, period.
Yeah.
Right. So if a drug addict has a prescription, then they can go get it filled. I mean, you watch this thing, and on a grand scale, you're looking at, what's been, how, they're just, catering to this addiction and creating it. So, there's like, there's obviously medicine has come a long way in how we treat infectious disease and what we know about our health and how, longevity. I mean, you look at like the grand scheme of things is, our overall, life expectancy has increased. Again, that goes back to, how we're treating infection and how we're curing some diseases, some cancers and things like that. But, again, even in that market, a friend of ours son died of osteosarcoma. This is a rare bone disease that about maybe 20,000 kids a year get. Not a ton of research going into it, and then by the time that they get it, it's usually too late because, it's like there's some swelling, there's some joint stiffness. And if your kid is somewhat athletic and growing, you're going to dismiss all this shit.
Mhm.
So, there's not a ton of money in that because there's not a lot of people that are having it. So, that's where the issue, lies. And then, you're looking at, there's treatment, there's there's doing something good that's coupled with, profits and running a business and people who are willing to have acceptable loss for certain things. The other thing that, again, that we're not really going to know what the real numbers are until like about 2 years after all of this, but there's a couple of glaring things that are just like sticking out. One is the overall death rate in the United States before COVID and after COVID has roughly stayed the same, while you see death rates for the flu go down dramatically, like 98% or 80% or something like that. You see death rates for heart disease and cancer go down. Normally what's happening is that, the people who are, and I'm going to use the term harvested, the people are going to be, that's what's happening. Problem is, it's like people, and the average age of people who are dying without like a severe comorbidity, like morbidly obese, hence the term morbidly. The average age is like 85 years old. The average lifespan is like 87 years old.
Yeah.
So, granted, but people die. I mean, we walk around and we die. There's a saying goes, no one gets out of here alive.
Yep.
Right. So, what they're not talking about is how to live a healthier life, how to make your, eat better, exercise more. I mean, the first thing they did was like stick us in, rooms, shut down gyms, shut down
these non-essential services.
Right. And telling people, again, stay home. They shut the parks here. I mean, granted, in the beginning, nobody knew what the hell they were dealing with. Right. I'm like, we thought that you got it, you died. They were expecting it was going to be like the Spanish flu. It's clearly not. The other, they thought, the death rate was going to be, Spanish flu, I think was like at like 2 or 3%, and it affected like all age groups. Tuberculosis is like still even there's like a 10% death rate. I'm like 1 million people, 1.4, 1.6 million people died last year from tuberculosis. So, you can't compare the two diseases at all. So, we know who's affected. We can treat and we can protect those who are. And then the other ones, like, live your lives, right? So, now it's like, I'm getting, we're looking for, when we relocate, man, I'm looking for a place that is, basically a red state with a concealed carry.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going. What's, living in New Jersey, I'm fortunate enough that, I have my private students. I'm like, no one's infringing on any of this yet. And we do our online thing, but it's like, man, I'm like, this is like out of control. And anytime there's a little spike, I mean, I'm talking to like, and normally, reasonable or intelligent or intelligent people, are just wrought with panic, and they're like, oh my God, the kids are getting sick. I'm like, have you had a young child? I'm like, kids get sick all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And they've started back at school here just this week or last week, September 7th or September 9th. So, we're apparently in the middle of this fourth wave, right? This new fucking Delta variant, MU variant, which is apparently out now. I mean, the numbers are starting to go back up a little bit because of,
Sure.
But here's the problem. The numbers are, one day it's 500 here and the next day it's like 869. And we're trying to figure out, how accurate these numbers are. They'll talk about deaths, but they'll use this term referred to as data cleanup. So this death was from like a month or 2 months ago. How the fuck do you apply deaths from 2, 3, 4 months ago to today? Right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And from a traveling, see where it affects us too is from a traveling standpoint. Before, when we were coming back to Canada, there was a 14-day quarantine period, right? So if I had a student who wanted to come in and fly in, if he was even able to get in, first of all,
Right.
14 days they would have to quarantine, and then he could come for potential training, or she could come for potential training.
Regardless whether they're vaccinated or not?
This before
Okay. All right.
this, it didn't matter, right? Because
Right.
now that our country has started to allow double vaccinated people to come in, as long as they have proof of a clear COVID test 24 hours prior to arrival,
Yeah.
they do not need to quarantine. So I've got somebody who's coming from Curacao double vaccinated. He had to make sure he had the right ones to be recognized. But he's coming in October, and he'll be able to train. He'll be able to go and go to the restaurants, go to the bars, that kind of thing, because he has proof of it. But for anybody who doesn't and wants to come and train, it makes it really, really, really difficult if you're not double vaccinated or kind of going in that direction. And even for myself, looking to fly, because I like to go and train in other places, it wasn't worth it for the longest time. Now I have to find out what the rules and policies are in different countries, because Germany is doing something very, very similar. Switzerland doing something very, very similar. So you're starting to see all of these places adopting this this vaccine certificate, vaccine passport program for what they call non-essential services. So you can still go into a fucking retail store, no fucking problem. They're not going to take that from you for now. Right. But anything else. And I mean, we're talking like strip clubs, sex clubs, all of that falls under the non-essential that you can't go to unless you're double vaccinated.
So I've been in a strip club in a long time, but are the strippers wearing masks?
I haven't been in a long time either. I really should go, because I have heard from now, because I have a friend who does dance, and they don't do the lap dance here. They don't do that lap dance anymore up close and personal. You've got this, barrier between. I'm like, then why the fuck would somebody be throwing you $20 for a dance? She's like, we're not making money. I'm like,
right.
Right.
See, I'd be tipping. I'd put the tip in the mask.
That's right. Through the glass pane, right? We're just going to be like,
right.
I wonder who's going to be cleaning those after. But it's just, it's a really strange situation, though. And it's interesting because I'm talking to different students online about it, and they're all going through the same thing. Sometimes you think it's just your own area, right? You think, how the fuck, why are we doing this here in Ontario, Canada? But it's everywhere. And that's the interesting thing, because I know you and I have talked about wanting to put together seminars and that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, what are going to be the rules and regulations depend on where we want to hold it for how that's going to play out.
Yeah, it's frustrating because we're ready to go.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of, kind of waiting to see, and it stinks because, you've got, places. Listen, I feel bad. One of my best friends, their event planning business was pretty much, but torpedoed.
Yep.
So, and they were going great guns, and now it's, I'm like, still waiting because, who knows what, if they shut shit down, I'm like, we lose, several $1,000s in deposits, getting, even just to start and plan an event. Yeah. So, and I miss it and I'm looking forward to it, but it's, man, I gotta, it's frustrating. So it's really about picking a state where we can do it, which, is most likely going to be Florida or Texas or Carolina. Because I just want to be something that's where I know it's going to be open and something where we can be near the water, have someplace, nice to hang out and not worry about, having, an event shut down or things like that. So there's not like these, travel bans or quarantine mandates and things like that. I mean, the reality is, it's like, we are, this is what they're saying is you need this identification, but right now, as it sits, the enforcement from my experience has been very lax.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're, shit, they're just, even if they're just checking a piece of paper. So, but, we're getting, but it's the idea that, once these things are in place, it's another way to control, it's another way to control large groups of people.
And you know, and the question is how far does it actually fucking go? Because I mean, is it going to come to a point where, as an instructor, any of our instructors who might want to do, say, corporate seminars and workshops, is it going to be mandated? Is it going to be forced that we have to be double vaccinated to go into company A, B, or C in order
I'm going
to?
to say that's 100% going to happen.
Yeah.
100%. You will not be able to do a live training seminar of any kind in any business right now as it sits without being double vaccinated. Yeah, 100%. You know, I just, it's just, it's strange, man. Cause now, I mean, look, like being able to protect yourself, falls into, to me, it's a freedom, right? I mean, this is a personal right to self-defense. So what you're gonna see is, man, I don't know. It's a slippery slope once we're
And
going.
and I'll tell you, I mean, you kind of prefaced it a little bit when you were addressing the person who's asking the question, and it's like, this is not a talk about whether people should be vaccinated or not, because again, you know, individual choice, individual rights. But I mean, as a business, you know, as an instructor, as a self-defense, you know, instructor practitioner here, one of my students, for example, he's got lymphoma. He may or may not die tomorrow. Like, we don't fucking know. He's on very borrowed time, but he still comes, trains. He just had his third shot, because now they're giving boosters, a third booster for people here who are
Right.
high risk, you know, individuals.
Right.
And, you know, right now, he's one of the only ones that I'm working with because of the situation, you know, as far as live goes. But
Mhm.
he's had a heart to heart with me too, along the lines of like, look, you know, are you going to be enforcing it? Because I don't want to risk my health. So, you know, whether you're a pro-vax or anti-vaxxer, it's tough from a business standpoint, because we have to protect our bottom line, right? So
Right.
we have to think about our customers who are coming in, and how do we deal with this, and understand that just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean that you're not going to fucking catch it. I mean,
Well, you bring up an interesting point. So, and this is my argument, and this is my argument to the physician's assistant when I'm like, I'm talking about, I'm like, so, no vaccine is 100% effective, but when they say effective, it's not that it works in like 95 or 90%. I'm just throwing a number out there,
yeah,
but it's a pass fail work. It
yeah,
either works for you or it doesn't. So once you're vaccinated, let's say you got the polio vaccine, which is a true vaccine, not this fucking, protein DNA changing shit. You got the real vaccine. You got a real vaccine where it's either dead culture or live culture, where your body can build up an immunity to it naturally. And it's interesting because you're hearing studies about people who have naturally had COVID and build up the antibodies being more resistant than the people who actually got the whatever we're calling a vaccine, right? So anyway, the difference is, it's like it works in 90 or whatever, just I'm going to say 90% because that's just a number I'm using. So let's just say the polio vaccine works in 90 is 90% effective, which means it works in 90% of the people. 10% of the people, it doesn't work properly, so they're going to run the risk of catching it, right? It's not that it works 90% of the time if you're exposed. That's not for the individual. You're either vaccinated or you're not. It either works or not. You don't get like a mild case of polio, right? So, and what we're seeing now is like if you get, that the people who are getting vaccinated, they're saying, oh, well, it would have been worse if I didn't get the vaccination.
yes.
That's 100% bullshit.
Yeah.
And I'm not buying that. And I have zero medical training whatsoever. Right. So, but that is not making sense because you either get it or you don't. Right. It's like it either, affects you or it doesn't. And I've known just as many people personally. Again, this is anecdotal. We're not going to know what the numbers are going to be until a couple of years from now. But I know people who were both vaccinated, same amount, both vaccinated and non-vaccinated, that got sick.
Yep.
And tested positive. So, I'm like, I don't recall ever hearing that with the flu at all, but I don't know who's paying attention to it then. You just got sick, right?
Yep.
So, when you're when the people, when you're saying like, it's 80% effective or whatever it is, it's, it's not, it shouldn't be 80% of the time you're protected. It should be 80% of the people who get vaccinated are protected. And, that's why, looking at this thing, I'm not thinking it's like it's, I don't know what it is. What the hell do I know? My hope is that, um, you need to, that the people who get it are going to be fine, and the people who don't get it, are going to survive at the appropriate survival rate, and we move past this. But as a instructor and a business owner, um, you know, do it, dealing with this situation. I mean, it's a hard choice to make if you really firmly believe that your health can be at risk. But then you're put in a position. It's the same shit they're doing with the NFL. They're not mandating that they get a vaccine, but there's severe penalties, like as in suspending a game if you have a COVID lockdown, and you're losing like millions upon millions of dollars. So.
Well, and just to say it, and it's interesting too because I mean, as far as the non-essential services and having to provide proof of vaccination, obviously that doesn't apply for kids, right? So they can still go into sporting events and still go into restaurants and all of this stuff because they don't qualify.
Right.
Now, so that's interesting. So I can get kids and I can teach kids a kids self-defense class, and potentially put other students at risk if if they're worried about that, depending on how much of a risk there actually is. So
right.
So it becomes so tough, right? Like, do I, as a business owner, do I say no? I'm not going to teach any kids, anybody under the age of 12. I'm not going to teach right now because they can't get vaccinated, and I have to deal with people who are at a more high risk, right? So it's a lot of decisions have to be made as self-defense instructors and even martial arts instructors, and a lot of people don't realize the decisions that we have to make and how this nonsense is really affecting everything from a business standpoint, right? It's a huge inconvenience for a lot of people. It's been a massive inconvenience for me over the last, since March of, what was it, 20? When did we first go into? When did COVID first make its way from fucking China or wherever it came from? Was that
February 2020?
Was that February 2020?
So yeah, and then around everything locked down around St. Patrick's Day, so around March 17th, 2020. Started, like, they canceled flights, they locked shit down. I know that because that's when we were supposed to go out to California.
Yeah. So I have not taught regularly in a live setting since then. Now we can start to kind of look at that, but everything is so different, and the questions that you get asked from people completely different, right? Are you vaccinated? They're asking me, are you vaccinated? Do I have to be vaccinated? What about this? What about that? And as a business, we don't get a lot of answers because our government doesn't have a fucking clue about most things anyways. Nobody has real answers for us of what we have to do.
So as a business owner, you really need to, one, what's your exposure on this, right? Can you be, sued from, your client? Can you be fined, or imprisoned or shut down from your local government? And it's going to happen on the local level, right? Yeah. So, that's one. Two is, you think of your exposure for your students, people you're training, your clientele. So, and then this, so, just like you said, you've got people that are coming in that are, dealing with cancer. They've got compromised immune systems, and this could be a variety of reasons, but so, and you don't know. And the other issue is, it's like, even if you are vaccinated, can you still transmit, right? I mean, typically, if it's a real vaccine and it is working on you, there's no way you should be able to transmit, right? It just dies there. So, that being said, but that's still an issue with how we're handling this.
It is, and I'll tell you. So we get daily numbers. So there's always the update of the numbers, like I was saying earlier. And today here in Ontario, it was approximately 869 numbers or something. But here's the interesting thing: 200 of those individuals are double vaccinated. Everybody else is either partially vaccinated or unknown status. So, I mean, you got 200 out of 860 that are double vaccinated that should be protected that have tested positive for it. That's a little bit concerning.
Yeah, that seems like a large number. Right. So you're saying there's 869 new cases.
Yeah, 800. I mean, out of 25 or 30,000 tests, right? So the numbers are obviously not ridiculous.
And that's not even, that's just the people who are tested. So that's the people who go in and don't feel well.
That's right.
Right. Or they have to, or where they're going requires that they have a mandatory test.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's not against the whole population. Anyway, so again, the numbers are still very small. Comparative, when you compare it to the Gen Pop. So, again, you focus on the numbers, and without any context of them, it seems like a massively large number.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, 869 people. No, dude, it's like out of how many millions of people are in Ontario? You're talking about Ontario, not just
Barrie. Like Toronto alone is almost 4 million people, right? So
go wall of holy crap! If you looked at how many people got colds. Over, again, we're a micro tracking this freaking thing. And so anyway, for the local guy who's trying to keep his gym open and do the things, I mean, you gotta, financially, you gotta, I'm gonna imagine most people are getting the vaccines, getting their paperwork in order just to kind of cover their ass.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where you don't need to, and you can exercise your free will and not get it, okay, good for you, but
you know what it is? It's forcing vaccines without forcing vaccines is exactly
right. Of course. So, I mean, and that's, you're not, no one's fooling anybody, but I just, it's frustrating. I cannot tell you, especially when you have kids. Excuse me, COVID. So when you have kids, like my daughter, she's 18, she's out in California, or she's 19 now. She's in the film, she's going to film study school, and she got it. I mean, I told she's over 18, and like she exercised her right to do it. Does it concern me? Yeah. So on that note, it's like, I don't want people who have been vaccinated to have some severe health issues just to prove my point. Yeah. I'm like, I want everybody to be fine. I want the people who get it to, survive and the numbers hold and all the other stuff. But if you're running a business, I don't know. I don't see, if you're interacting with people, with the public, I don't see at this point in time right now how you get away with it. Without getting it. So, I mean, it's like, look, I mean, everybody's talked about this ad nauseum, from a business perspective, and training and teaching self-defense. It's a close quarters situation. Yes. I mean, if you've got, I don't know if there's any way of, it's like, look, who's to say that, you're teaching somebody, they say they're vaccinated, they show you paperwork, and then it turns out they're not. I mean, whatever, I mean, it's, you can only do what you're able to do, and you want to act in the best interest, real or imagined, of your clients. And you want to be able to, at least give them some peace of mind and not worry about, what their exposure is when they come to you. I think most people who operate in this space are kind of the same mind. And the reality is, what's going to happen is, if you're really concerned about your exposure, you're not going to go out to eat. Right. Yep. You're not going to go to to work out. You're not going to go, and that's really what it should come down to. It's like, look, there's a risk. We really don't know what it is. If you don't worry about, getting sick, don't go. Right? That's it. It's your choice, not, mandatory. I mean, now we've got our current administration talking about, the other half of the country that's not vaccinated, like that kind of thing. And we've been told all along that if we get, so much percentage, we'll have herd immunity. We'll be fine. We just need to get these. And then once we hit that, they move the goalpost again.
Yep.
And now it's like, okay, now it's not 1 or 2 shots. It's a booster shot. It's 3 shots. Yep. Keep moving the goalposts. Keep moving the goalposts. Keep moving the goalposts. It's, the one thing, getting back to, my oncologist, she's walking out the door, and the last thing she says to me is like, science isn't political. I'm like, I can't think of anything further from the truth.
Yeah.
And when she's, I just, we can even look at, right in the beginning of things, when our beloved Dr. Fauci said that masks were ineffective, and then he later came out and said, no, they're effective. The reason I said that was because I didn't think we were going to have enough masks for first responders and caregivers. Right there, that statement is political.
Yep.
So all of these, every university, every professor receives grants and funding from private businesses and private individuals. And you bet if I'm funding that better be in line with what I believe and what I want to see. And that's what happens, and that's what drives it. So, this fantasy that, it's like people, the science, I'm like, the science is what? I'm like, we don't get transmission outdoors. It dies in UV light, right? Where, the CDC is actually at 3 feet, not 6 feet. You need a certain time of exposure and a certain parts per million for, to get actually infected. I don't know what those numbers are, but one thing I know it's not like we sit in an elevator and you get off, we take an elevator ride and you get off. I'm not going to get you sick, right? It doesn't work that way. It takes a certain amount of time, right? So I understand, a mask will stop someone from basically spitting and coughing on you, right? Yeah. So I get that. Whatever, I'm not against my food servers wearing masks. In fact, I kind of like it.
Yeah.
But it's like, they're like, the science is that they're not even paying attention to the science. So now we've got this hyper, and every day there's something, that's constantly reminding you of the numbers and the death rate and the things like that. So now we're trying to convince somebody to come in and train with us and to get close to us. It's an uphill. It's a little bit of a sell, unless they absolutely don't give a crap about it. But if the people are really, if you have a client who's really concerned about it, they're not even going to consider it. And then guess what? Okay, we're going to train online.
Yeah. And, and I'm glad that you just mentioned the political side here too, because just talk about this really quickly. We have an election coming up on September 20th, a federal election. And, now you're getting this massive fucking division between, vaccinated and unvaccinated. And they didn't want this fucking division, or said they didn't want this division, but, goddamn well, they're the ones.
Of course.
But here's the problem. Now you're getting an increase in violence over this, right? It's the whole fucking Black Lives Matter again now, but it's just in fucking vaccinated versus not vaccinated. So, I mean, for us, I'm seeing an increase in people looking for, self-protection services. They want to be safe because they realize shit's going sideways all over the
world. Jordan Peterson, I think he's a Canadian. Really, psychologist, scientist, conservative thinker, turned me on to a book called Hitler's Table Talk.
Okay.
And it's basically, I know, it's fucking amazing. So it's basically a collection of journal entries from Hitler's inner circle around there having dinner.
Okay.
And, I don't know, how many people realize this, that, the Nazi movement started, and Hitler is, first of all, Hitler's like complete germaphobe. He bathed 4 times a day. And what started in the beginning with the Nazis, it's all about cleanliness.
Yep.
Tuberculosis, closing factories, fumigating them. And you look at the extermination of the gypsies and the Jews and the undesirables that were living in Europe. And it's one thing, if you fear someone, it's a different reaction than if you are disgusted by someone.
Yes.
These guys, he believed that, this is like subhuman. These people were here to infect us and kill us. And it's really no different than what is happening right now with the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And you hear people talking about having separate groups or separate areas or separate events and things like that. And if I look at you and I think my life is threatened, this is like self-defense. This is what we do. If you threaten my life, I'm going to use violence to protect it. So if you're coming at me and you come near me and I think you're going to get me infected or infect my children and they could die, I'm going to do whatever I need to do. And that's what's happening. I mean, we're only moving in that direction more and more. We're not moving away from it.
That's right.
And they have the same exposure than if they get the flu. All right. I mean, it's the same type of death rate. I mean, there are different nuances and they don't know what any of the long-term effects are. Right. People will say that, they still have respiratory. Yeah. I mean, that may be part of the recovery for some people. Again, every person is different. Every case is a little different, but for the most part, I don't even know what the longer-term effects of the flu are.
Yeah.
I know there are times I feel like crappy for weeks after, right? So you're looking at this, from a historical perspective, and while we're using science to justify what we're doing, they use science too.
Yeah.
And, the people who are, looking for these lockdowns and looking for these quarantines and looking for, the segregation of a group of people who are not vaccinated. Well, hell, man, that's no different than what happened in, pre-World War II Germany. That's no different than happened in any genocidal. I mean, any genocide, they view the target as insects, as subhuman, and something that is an infestation and that could literally kill them.
Yep.
So, I mean, going back to the beginning, it was funny because my actual oncologist, we had this conversation, and he came in and we were talking about it. This was last year. It's like, well, maybe we put a barcode on the people who are vaccinated. I go, really?
Oh, Jesus.
And I'm assuming where he lived and by his name, I go, he was Jewish, right? So I'm like, I go, Doc, I'm not going to make any assumptions, but I go, I got a better idea. Instead of the barcode, I go, why don't we put numbers on people's wrists? Yeah. I go, why don't we segregate them, the people who are vaccinated and non-vaccinated, into ghettos?
Yep.
And I go, why don't we uproot them and just, move them? Maybe we'll move them into a state like Texas. So then he started to realize what he was saying, because he came at me with, you're not getting vaccinated. I go, I don't know. Probably not right now. He goes, you don't like, you want to kill you want to end humanity. And this is his response to me. I'm like, holy shit, Doc.
Yeah.
So when I started comparing him to a Nazi, and he started to kind of, because he's a smart guy, and this is smart people that have been indoctrinated with this shit. When he's hearing it back at him, then he completely shut down. In fact, when he heard me having the vaccine conversation with the physician's assistant, he came in the room and left. Right. So he knew where I was at, because that's what's happening next. And again, asking simple questions like, well, how much at risk am I? What's my death rate? How much higher risk are you saying? Can we quantify that? Do you have any type of study, with people with my type of cancer recovery that have been exposed to COVID And what's the recovery rate?
Yeah.
Nothing. Okay. So you don't know. And that's where, and these are people who are medical professionals. So at the end of the day, to wrap this up, because it's been done enough, and this is the last time I really want to be talking about COVID. Yeah. As it relates to running your business and feeding your family. I mean, look, you do what you got to do, but one, find out what your exposure is. Two, get answers specific to your what you do. If it's if you're teaching private lessons or semi-private lessons, maybe different than if you have something that's open to the public.
Yep.
My first like in the United States, I would maybe talk to the health department to see about but even they're not going to know too many of the answers, and they're always going to err on the side of caution.
Yeah,
always. They're not gonna. They're gonna. They're gonna say, "Oh yeah, get vaccinated. Make sure they're vaccinated, and make sure they have the paperwork." So it's up to your discretion when you're dealing with individual clients as you get to know them. Some of them may get offended with you asking them.
Yeah.
If they are, it's like, look, and one of the ways around is like, hey, look, they're going to ask me. I have to ask you. I can pretend to have asked you if you are or not. I go, you don't have to answer this. And if they don't answer it, you pretty much know that they're not vaccinated.
Yeah.
Because anything other than yes, people ask
no.
me, are you vaccinated? I'm like, it depends who's asking. Yeah,
that's right.
Anything other than a yes is a freaking no.
Yeah.
So on that bombshell, let's just call it what it is. Hopefully, we can, we'll continue to get through this. Post your comments below. Always welcome to hear them. And that's
I'd love to know. I love to know what's going on in other, other countries, other states, other provinces. For those who are currently maybe training in other establishments or anything, would love to just kind of hear how your training is going. Whether you're in a group doing actual training with people, or if you're still doing your own personal kind of one-on-one thing. So, or just your own hitting a fucking bag, whatever it is. I'd love to know what people are doing.
And even if you are teaching publicly. If how these things are being enforced and if they're being enforced.
Yeah.
That'd be good to know too. All right, cool. All right, George. Till next time, everybody, train honestly.